Good evening, everyone. We would like to welcome you to Suffolk Public Schools Finance Committee of the Suffolk School Board. May 8th, 2023, our Finance Committee meeting will hereby be called to order. Our first item of business is the review of resolution for our year-end spending. And at this time, we'll turn it over to Ms. Forsman.
Good afternoon. All right, the resolution for year-end spending is on the school board agenda for this month, but we always like to, in this May meeting, give you some insight as to why those items were picked and where we are in the process with those items. We do not put money beside those items, if you'll notice the list, because some of them are still out for bid. Some of them may or may not happen depending on what is left at year end. We will not have that information until well after the board meets in June, but it has to be closed out prior to June 30th. So we like to make sure in May that the board has an opportunity to see what items are on the list and approve the superintendent encumbering those items before year end. I will remind you that an encumbrance is a contract. It is based on a contract and becomes the contract with the school division and the vendor. Once we close, we may not change the amount, the vendor name, or anything about that purchase order. That is the safeguard so that you know what we're doing. That has to stay the same. So if it does not, if we do not spend it, then the next year it is given back to the city, and we usually ask for it to be reappropriated. But those are the guidelines, the rules and regulations, and we follow them to a T. So on here, the first item is sinkhole repairs. We currently have a list of incomplete repairs to the tune of $2.5 million. That list was updated last 2 weeks ago of items that are sinkholes that we have found that we have made temporary repairs to but need to have permanent repairs. The bathroom sinks and countertop replacement at Lakeland and Nansemond River High School. Both of those need to be replaced. We have that out for a job order contract, which we are allowed to do under law. We do not have a price on that yet. Additional metal detectors, we've talked about safety, and so we were looking to get additional metal detectors with year-end money. Light and ceiling tile replacement at John Yates Middle School. If you've been in that school, you'll see that that lighting is one of the worst in our buildings, and so we're looking to replace the lighting. Some of it, especially some of the 1970s drop lights, and we're looking to replace the ceiling tiles in that school with more 2x2 instead of 4x4 tiles. New gym at Northern Shores Elementary. As you know, we replaced that ceiling. It was leaking. That floor is damaged. It's damaged beyond just repairing it. We're waiting for the bid docs on that, the specs for the docs, for the bid documentation on that so that we can go out for bid for that. White Fleet, additional replacement for transporting students. That is additional vehicles, small vehicles that we can purchase to transport our own students. We're currently paying a service to do that, and it is costing quite a bit of money. It is eating into our budget tremendously. And so we feel like if we can get the White Fleet to transport the students ourselves with drivers who do not have to have a CDL, then we will save quite a bit of money. In fact, we feel like we'll, in the first year, more than make up any money we would spend on that fleet. So if we can get the fleet, that's one of the problems, is you may not be able to get the fleet. Fiber extension projects and cameras and cell phone replacements that are end of life. As you know, some of our fiber doesn't go all the way to the places we need it, and we need to build in redundancy, so if something were to happen to the city's fiber, that we would have our own fiber network. We've been slowly working on these projects for the last 4 years. This is a continuation of that. John identifies each year the next project and has a list of those projects. So if we have money to do that, we would like to be able to do that. We have cameras and cell phones at the end of their life. That is security cameras in schools and telephones that are the voice over IP. We'd like to replace those. And then because the city has taken our CIP money that we would normally do HVAC repairs with, large repairs, we feel like it's important if we have money at year end to put a purchase order aside to cover emergency repairs that may come up that we wouldn't have the money for otherwise. And again, this is all contingent upon if there is money at year end. This is not a prioritized list. Once we get all the costs and everything, then we'll begin to prioritize this list. But we will not obligate anything at year end, right at June 30th, that is not on this list.
All right, Board Member Howell, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. The sinkholes that are on here, are they a continuation of what we've been working on and discussing for over a year now? Okay. And is there a certain number of metal detectors you all have in mind, or is that dependent upon the amount left over?
So it's actually more for our elementary schools. I think Dr. Brown is looking to purchase 27 metal detectors. We had already purchased some for our secondary schools. We had already purchased approximately 51s. Now we're moving to make sure that we have multiple metal detectors at each school.
Okay, thank you. Is the white fleet on back order? Is that something that we've been working on and we're still waiting for stock?
Actually, it's been unavailable, and so we are waiting to see if we can
Okay.
find White Fleet.
So not even
to
on
purchase.
back order?
Yeah, you can't even get it, and so it's on here because if we have money, we would really like to go out and see if we can
Jump on
find
that.
it and get it.
Okay. And then my last question, when you referenced the city taking the HVAC, was that money they took to put towards JFK, or what happened to that?
Towards Northern
Northern
Shores Edition.
So the
Okay.
preventive maintenance money at $3.575 million a year, that's what's being used as the funding source for the renovation expansion of Northern Shores.
Okay.
And that's over 5 years or 6? 5, I think.
That's 1 year of design, 3.5 years of construction.
So, yeah.
Okay. And then just to clarify and restate for the record, there's not a money amount designated to these yet, because we don't know how much money to allow for, and some of these bids are still out, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
So I just want to go back and reiterate. So basically, it's not that the city has taken money. It's an agreement between the school board and the city to reallocate the HVAC money to finance the Northern Shores Edition.
Correct.
Okay.
That leaves us without that emergency money that we would need.
Correct. All right, and the next thing I wanted to touch base on is the White Fleet. This is the second year we're buying White Fleet. Are we buying it from one particular vendor who just doesn't have it, or is this something that could possibly, be shopped around, or is it stipulated as into who we purchase from?
The state has contracts for fleet, and we
Okay.
use those contracts, and each year they're awarded sometimes to new vendors, but we keep a constant eye out for what's out there and what they've awarded, and if it's available, and that's been a real problem.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure that the narrative is, any ambiguity is moved, because I don't want people to think that, okay, well, you can just go to any car lot and buy a car, because when people hear fleet, if you don't know how government and municipalities work, you will assume so that, hey, well, let me just go down to Star Motors and they got a bunch of white cars on the lot. I'm going to buy everything that they have white on the lot. I mean, it's readily available there, but these funds are pretty much restricted funds. You can only use them with certain vendors who have been pre-approved, who have already went through the state process.
That's correct.
Not our process, but the state process and the state mandate. So it's not that we are trying to finagle and dance with funds. It's restricted funds.
It is.
They tell you who you can spend with. Regarding year-end spending, where are we with the year-end spending from last year? Did we turn any money back over to the city?
We have not yet. We will by June 30th if we have leftover. At this point, what's left we're waiting on the bus delivery, and they're telling us it's going to be right at middle June before we get it. And we're waiting for the smaller buses, the step-down buses we purchased.
Right.
Those aren't here yet either. We've been working very carefully with Sunny Merriman, where we purchased them, to make sure that deadline is going to be met, that it'll be for June 30th. We always have a little bit, like 30,000 or less, that are just little pieces of purchase orders that are left over. Things come in less, something's back ordered, then they can't get it by the end of the next year, those kinds of things. You have supply chain issues. We still are in that issue with supply chain issues. But we try very hard not to obligate something that we don't know for a fact that we're going to spend in that next year.
Okay. And I'm not trying to overdouse you all with questions, but I want to make sure that our community is fully in the loop. we know that we're preparing for a potential $2 million budget shortfall. This year-end fund, some would say, well, why don't you just give it back to the city so they can give you that $2 million back in July? Could you reiterate why we are choosing to go this route?
So are you referring to the $2 million shortfall? Yes. So I think one of the biggest pieces of clarification that we've tried to use for some constituents and some of members of our local body is that money was already appropriated to the school division. And it's actually the money that wasn't spent by the end of the fiscal year. So they can't pay us back with our own money is probably the best way to say it. It has to be new funds that are generated from the city's revenue that they have. I think it's about $35 million surplus revenue that they have. So any money that Ms. Forsman was referring to was our original allocation that we actually received last July 1, that we just may not have had an opportunity to spend it all because of some of the issues that she mentioned when it comes to supply chain by June 30th. However, we have already earmarked, which is the reason why that word encumbrance is there. We've already earmarked where those funds are going to go, specifically to that vendor, specifically for this item, et cetera. It's just a matter of when it actually arrives. The supply chain issues are still a huge issue for us, not only in Suffolk, but probably throughout the nation.
And I just wanted to ask that question because I know that's a hot question that, oftentimes you're asked. Some people don't understand that when you're dealing with municipality funding, it's different funding pots. You have operations, you have personnel, and then you have CIP. So you can't just shift from CIP and move to operations and then move to personnel. The funds come with restrictions. So when we said we were $2 million short in our budget, that is operational, personnel, correct? Well, operations. So we just wanted to make sure that all citizens who are watching at home, that you are 100% in the loop. All right, if there are no more questions regarding the resolutions for year-end spending, we're going to move forward to the next item on the agenda, and that's review of the budget recommendations change. Once again, Madam Forsman, break it down for us.
All right. This, again, is on the board agenda, but we want to give you a little more insight as to why the numbers look different from what the city did, because the city approved an appropriation of about $225 million. What they didn't do was take into account the skinny budget that was passed and the changes that were made to the budget. Now, the budget isn't complete at the state level. That hasn't been finished, but the information that we have to go on now indicates that the bonus of 1% is not in those numbers. So as the board adopts this budget, we do not want the citizens or our own employees to think there's a 1% bonus approved by the state, because it is not approved by the state at this point. So we removed that as part of our redo of the budget. So on the third page of the slide, the state reduction of $835,787 is a reflection of that skinny budget that was passed, less the bonus, because that was not in there. The city did not remove that money when they did their appropriation to us. So when I give you the totals for our budget that you're going to adopt a different number than they appropriated, because we have to show you what's really going to happen. So $835,787 is the reduction of state revenue because of that bonus that is not in the skinny budget. The city reduced our appropriation by $2 million. Once you remove the bonus, which is the FICA and the bonus itself that are on the non-departmental page, number 65, the total expense reduction we needed is $1.6 million, 1692347. So that's different than $2 million. That's why I wanted to explain that here so you can understand. That's why. Sure, sure.
That's actually how much the deficit is we're facing, is the 1692.
Yes, yes, not 2 million, because the cost of the bonus was a little over $480,000. So you got the difference there of that. So that's why, okay? We had to take that back out because our employees can't expect that when it was not approved at the time you adopt the budget.
So if the state approved
They won't fund all of it, no, sir.
So we're looking at still some possibility, the deficit can go up. This is the floor, basically.
Yes, sir.
1.6.
Yes, sir.
The 2 million is if they don't fund any of it, we got enough to pay that 1% plus the other that we have.
Basically, yes, sir. What would happen is if the state came back with a 1% bonus, they would give us extra money. They would give us that $480-some thousand. And then we would have to come up with the difference. I mean, I said that wrong. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
I
let's-
said that wrong.
Yeah.
We have to come up with the difference of the $480-some thousand. They would give us the money for the bonus, just like it shows in the budget book that you approved. They has like 580,000 as a revenue from the state for the bonus. They would give us that back. So I removed that revenue, plus I added the skinny budget, which was a couple $100,000 more or less that the skinny budget was approved by the state and signed. They have not finalized budget. They'll come back late June and finalize budget. If they decide they're going to give us that 1%, they would then increase our appropriation back in order to do that. And we would then have to come back to you as a board and say, we're going to add this back in. Does that make sense?
So it won't be an unfunded mandate?
No. They'll fund it.
The bonus is never fully funded by
Never.
the state. That just never
So I'm
happens.
sorry, I had it
So
backwards.
The locality always has to pay a percentage of it, which is what Ms. Forsman was trying to explain. They usually give us anywhere between 50 and 60%. And so we don't call it an unfunded mandate, but we call it partially funded, because that's usually what happens. And so the timing of it all, and we're under the assumption, like we've discussed before, that there will be some movement at the General Assembly the week of June 20th to the 24th. That's still all rumor until we actually see that it occurs. And then even if they do come back, they then have to make sure they make a decision before June 30th. And that's why we're really up against the wall when it comes to timeline.
Right, but it just wouldn't be financially prudent of us to leave things in there that aren't in the budget and won't be funded. You know, so $1,692,347. So we went back and looked at how we could come up with that amount of money in order to balance our budget. And the next page gives you the recommended changes. The athletic trainers contract, as you know, the athletic trainers contract we were under, they said they couldn't fulfill it. We had to go back out for bid. Initially, we thought it was going to come in much higher than it actually did, so we were able to get $109,985 from that line to help us. That we eliminated some positions, as you can see here, the ITRT, the technology, 10 teacher assistants, the S3s, all 28 of them, and we had to look at raises because we couldn't really reduce anything else in the budget. So when we looked at that, because that raise was almost 23%, we took it from $19 an hour to $18 an hour, which is still a 17% raise, to get the difference. So we reduced 40 positions, and the total of those items comes to the $1,692,347. But again, if you look at the next page, we have $224,665 as our total budget. The city approved $224,880,000 and some change. They approved basically $225 million. But again, we cannot in good conscience bring you a budget to adopt that has something in it that we know is not funded. Are there any questions?
No, and it just goes back to the point that we have to pass a balanced budget. We can't be wishful thinking and something goes wrong, and now, you know, we done hired people, then we got to come back and tell them, as a result of lack of funding, we got to let you go. So we have to be very strategic, up, forward, and coming. I don't have any questions. Vice Chair, how do you have any additional questions?
I think I just would like Ms. Boardman to speak to, for the sake of whoever may be watching, or come back and ask other areas that were considered before we just completely cut out the S3s. I know you have like budget, Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D, probably on through F. So with the concern and chatter that's gonna come up that, you know, money could have been taken from here, there, everywhere, can you just talk about what was considered rather than eliminating a huge chunk of our, I would call it strategic plan moving forward?
Yeah, I think the hardest part, Ms. Howell, is anytime you have to go with cuts, you have to go first with what you already had. And so our first level that we looked at was two-part, anything that was new being added, but also the things that were mandated by the government. So the 5% increase, $7.9 million. So couldn't do anything with that because we had to do something about it. The reading specialists that came over off of Title I that we had to cover, mandated. So when you look at those types of things, that's almost $10 million, and we were short two. So one of the things that I asked Ms. Forsman to do is to take a look at, okay, anything that was new, that's going to be the first level that we're going to have to do. And if we get this money back from the state, now we know what we can put back in. There wasn't any other way that we could cut anything else because of what we had to do. We know that insurance rates are going to go up. She's going out for, is that already out for bid?
It's already back, and we're reviewing it now.
You see, that's already back, and we know that based on inflation and the feedback that she's received, that's going to be additional amounts that we have, and just inflation itself. We didn't really have hardly any flexibility, so it really had to be anything new that we were adding, with the hope that if we do get this money back at the end of June, because these were new positions, we can add those back in. We couldn't mess with the teacher contracts at all. We didn't want to do anything about any of the services for Saturday Academy, any of our other instructional programs. We really wanted to carry over things that we already had within the budget. That was really our top priority, plus the mandates that came down from the state. That kind of just soaked up any flexibility that we had.
Where are we, since this is Finance Committee, where are we in the conversation with City Council? You know, we have a resolution potentially on the agenda, that if they provide the $2 million and the state comes down with it, we give it back to them, and, you know, I'm hearing that's not even allowable. So where are we with
That's,
somebody recouping this $2 million for us? Like, what, statistically speaking, what are the odds we're gonna get
it,
from somewhere?
from my conversations with our attorney, it is allowable. A resolution, what some people are thinking is, we have no way to enforce you to give us that money back. Once money is already allocated, the city can't go back and say, well, you got additional funding, give us that money back. Because once they already allocated, budget has been passed, they can't take it back. The only way they can get it back is if we gift it back to them. The resolution is a formal document from the board saying that this is what we're going to do. You do have an option to break a resolution. I doubt this board will break the resolution because we are people of our words, but this is why it's important to foster relationships between council and the board, especially board members and their borough representative, because then you have that level of trust. The fact that it is being rumored that they can't do it shows us that we have more work to do on building the bridge and strengthening the relationship between city and school board, because it's not that we put safety on the tail end. It's not that we put raises of staff on the tail end. When you look at our major classifications slide, you'll see that instructional and instruction supports is our largest category. So Dr. Gordon and his team, along with Madam Queen Finance Guru Forsman, has went above and beyond to ensure that we have a feasible, workable budget. And in good faith, we're just asking council to give us a hand up. Trust us. We have not given you a reason to doubt us. And I want to I'm glad you asked this, because now I'm going to get on my little soapbox right quick, but the encumbrance contracts that we're doing, that we did last year, those things were things that was found in the facility study. It saved us money to do it when we did it last year, to lock people in at the rates last year when we had the contracts and the bids out. If we would have waited another school year, everything is going up with each month. So for us to lock them in June with June rates versus waiting for July money to come through, price change. especially in the climate that we're living in now. So we are moving along with our facility study. We're chiseling at it. And keep in mind, we don't have the ability to generate our own money. So we have to be wise with the resources we do have. Dr. Gordon?
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Riddick. And Ms. Howell, to answer the first part of your question, of course the city can get the money back. So there's two ways that they can do it. The first one is a budget amendment, which is what we suggested, which is kind of what the resolution is hinting at, that we're hoping that the board is going to pass on Thursday. The second one is at the end of the year, when it comes to any money that we have left over, they can keep $2 million of any of the funds, just like the money that we normally would ask back for reappropriation. They can reserve to keep the $2 million. So I'm unsure why, someone may have informed you that that can't happen, because that's just not true. There's budget amendment or reappropriation that can be kept, because it's the city's right to determine if they want to give it back at the end of the fiscal year. They can actually do that every fiscal year, but we already have reasons and explanations on why we're going to be able to spend the money. So we're hoping that if the state gives us the money, this point will be moot. But we know that there's at least two different methods that this city can get their $2 million back if they were to loan it to us.
I think that they were speaking more to the legal standing of the resolution as far as, and you spoke to this, requires trust. If there was a board that didn't back the resolution, the document itself doesn't do anything for city council to hold us accountable. I think that's more the direction they were headed. So, is city council reconsidering the $2 million, or are they waiting to see what the state does at the very last minute?
From my dialogues with representative of the city, a lot of people are waiting to see what the state do. But the resolution is something that has to go in from the board. Preferably we can get it passed. I believe it's going to pass, but it's just a trust thing. It shows us we as a board, we have work to do to repair that relationship with city council. We don't know how it's going to be done. It's not going to be done overnight, but we're two governing bodies serving the same constituents. And the success of your school system, the safety of your school system, and the overall image of your school system has a direct impact on the growth of your city. And I believe most of our council members, if not all of them, understand that. It's just there's a barrier that is holding up trust. And that's what we have to work on. We can just put our best foot forward, and this is our contingency plan in the event that the money don't come through. If the money don't come through, this is the budget, this is where it's at. I mean, we hear a lot of people holler safety, safety, safety. If you can't give us the full $2 million, no, I ain't even gonna say that, I ain't give you way out. We want the full $2 million, because the climate and safety is just, you've seen the news recently. You see it. Our city is getting off the chain. And speaking of safety, let me address this. A lot of people say, why don't you contract with the Suffolk Police Department, or why don't you contract with the Suffolk Sheriff's Office? Through research, they don't have the manpower to do so. If you contract with the Sheriff's Office, where is our Sheriff's Office going to get the additional deputies? It will gut the police department. If you contract with the police department, they are at a shortage as well. I was in an FBI roundtable, and there's a shortage of law enforcement officials in the 757. Even in cities such as Chesapeake and Virginia Beach, there's a shortage. There's an exodus from public service jobs. So we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. But what I will employ to each board member between now and the end of June, have a one-on-one with your city council representative and advocate for what we need. These are not wants. These are needs. These are needs that our city council has articulated. These are needs that our board has articulated. these are needs that the citizens have articulated. So it's not Dr. Gordon's wish list or Ms. Forsman's wish list or yours and mine's wish list. These are needs. Are there any additional questions regarding the review of budget changes? Okay, at this time, we're going to move forward with the review of bonus payments being requested for board approval.
All right. Once again, this is also on the board agenda, but we wanted to give you a little more insight as to exactly why it's written the way it is and what the caveats are with this particular bonus. As you know, it is very hard to retain staff, very hard to retain staff. So we have gone out for bid in the CARES Act 3 for roof replacement, our last 3 roof replacements that we had planned for. We have gotten those numbers back. Those numbers had some money left over in that budget line. So in discussions about what would be the best use of these funds, it was felt that what we ought to do is try to retain staff as much as possible through providing a bonus in June to this staff. However, you have to have parameters. It says that staff who are full-time and part-time who receive their contract or pay notification that sign it no later than June 9th, close of business, 4 p.m., that's a Friday, will receive this bonus in June. I can't do part-time employees because they don't get a contract or pay notification. I can't do substitutes for the same reason. Priority subs, all substitutes, tutors, people that teach night classes, they don't get those kinds of things from us. So we made a separate plan for them. If priority tutors, priority or long-term subs, or anyone who teaches an adult night class worked for us 90 days this year, and will come back to work for us 90 days next year, we'll provide them $150 in December, again, out of the CARES Act. We felt like that was fair. We have no way of contracting with these folks. There is just no way to do that. So we felt like it was fair to say if you work 90 days this year and 90 days next year, that is about 1 year for us. It's the same as what we're giving out to staff who've been here this year for us in the new one. So the plan would be to give out $750 as a separate flat check to full-time and $375 flat check to permanent part-time folks who signed their contract or their pay notification by June 9th, close of business. We'll make that payment out the last week of June. And then we took it further and said that if Governor Youngkin does sign a 1% bonus into law, that this will now count towards that 1% bonus for anyone who makes less than $75,000 base pay. So that just protects us. So because that's a retention bonus that they were planning before it was taken out of the budget at the state level. This is a retention bonus. It just protects us to give our folks more money who make less than $75,000. So they'll receive, instead of 1% of their pay, which in some cases is about $360, they would receive $750 flat. So it's a much nicer bonus, nicer way to do it, but it's also tied back to if Governor Youngkin puts that in place, we've met those criteria. So I just wanted you to be aware of why we didn't include substitutes and priority subs and tutors and stuff, and why we felt the need to do the bonus and how it's set up. We also put in a caveat that if people leave, they sign for their contract or their pay notification and then decide not to show up in September, that we will take it from the final check that we pay them. We will remove that back because it is CARES Act money and it is a retention bonus. So if they have an intention of coming back to us but then do not follow through, that we feel it's incumbent upon us to try to recoup that money.
Any questions?
I just want to clarify that because it's CARES Act money, that stipulates how and when we can use it. So for some folks, we can't apply it necessarily to the JFK deficit that we had. We can't apply it to the 2 million, well, 1.6 right now.
Right.
Yeah, it specifically has to go to a certain set of
Rules, and we have to have those approved by the state. So we have done an amendment, we've had it approved by the state. It's all completely approved already for us to use CARES Act money for this. We cannot spend that money without having explicit approval for exactly what it's going to be used for from the state. So we wouldn't bring it to you until it was approved.
And I just want to add to that. So The timing of this is really imperative, that I'm asking both Chair Riddick and Vice Chair Howell to make sure that all of our board members understand this has to be approved on Thursday. And part of the reason is it takes time for both Budget and Finance and HR to be able to key in these amounts for all of our employees that this affects. Then on the back end, because this is due for our contracts, we plan to issue contracts after the board adopts the budget right around May 24th. So we want to give about 2 weeks for folks to be able to sign their contracts with the ending date being June 9th, because then they need that to prepare for that payroll distribution on June 30th. So we really can't have any delays because of the vast number of employees that we have, plus the information that Ms. Forsman has shared earlier about this being year end. So nothing can carry over. I'm glad you asked that question, Ms. Howell, about the parameters. I'm going to say the barriers, anything that's related to instruction when it comes to this bonus, only because of a difference that we saw for roof repairs. And if you all remember from Mr. Napier's presentation, remember, we've been controlling and doing our own roof repairs, saving the city almost $18 million, and making sure that we're taking care of our own facility work coming from the facility study. If that roof repair difference wasn't less than what we thought, we wouldn't be able to do this bonus. And I think one of the things that Ms. Forsman said is really important at the end is we're actually giving people more twofold. Number one, for those folks that are making less than $75,000, from $360 to $750, it's a $390 difference. But you can also see on page 2, we are giving you a flat $750. So the bonus is actually $1,161 to make sure that people are taking home their money. So we're trying to go above and beyond. I sent an email out to the staff today letting them know that this was on the board agenda as a part of Teacher Appreciation Week, to let them know was to not only appreciate them for their work for this year, but also as a part of our retention plan for next year as well. So I just wanted to make sure that both of you were aware of the importance of the timing of all this.
Any additional questions? I do want to take this opportunity before we adjourn. It was stated that the cost of insurance went up, and I want you to point out which type of insurance are we talking about, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea and think it's school board insurance that went up. Because when you make the blanket statement, insurance went up, and given the heighten of the climate we're in, it's easy for that narrative to be drawn. But when you say insurance, you're talking about
Health
our
insurance.
staff health insurance.
Health insurance.
Yes, sir. We're, as you know, we're looking to put a pharmacy in place in August. We're hoping that will combat the increased cost of insurance, so we won't actually have to go up on what we ask the employees to contribute out of their paychecks, nor will we have to increase our budget. So we are banking a lot on our pharmacy to help us mitigate those costs. And we feel like from the numbers we've run and from the consultant information we've received that it will more than do that. But when you go out for bid for anything in this day and age, as you know, most health insurances over the last 5 years have gone up 10, 15% each year. Suffolk Public Schools, because of our wellness program and other things, has been able to maintain our cost with the same number of employees covered at about 0.25% increase over 4 years, which is huge. We're hoping that by putting the pharmacy in place that we can continue that trend and not ask our employees to add more cost to what's coming out of their paycheck, nor ask the board to add more budget to the budget for those costs. So we're hoping that this will mitigate all of that.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any additional questions, comments, concerns, celebrations? All right. It brings me great joy to let you all know that we are now about to adjourn from our Finance Committee meeting at the Immaculate Booker T. Washington Elementary School. This school does house our Parent Resource Center for students with disabilities. So I do wanted to put that out. If there's any parents who have children with disabilities, you can contact the school here and schedule a time to go in our Parent Resource Center. At this time, our meeting is adjourned. You're dismissed.